Hey there, welcome to Go News. I'm sure Michael Singleton. Thanks so much for tuning in. So if you pay attention to the news, which I know most of you all do, you have certainly followed what's going on with the NRA. I mean, it's sort of hard not to, right? Well, while we get into the salaciousness of the details of what's going on out of the state of New York, one thing I thought was sort of fascinating to me, and that is the fact that no one's really talked about the 74-year-old Wayne LaPierre, the man who's led the NRA for the past 32 years. I mean, that's as long as I've been alive, to tell you the truth. And as I began to do my digging on LaPierre, I thought, people should know who exactly is this person and what is he accused of. Well, we're going to get into those details because facts do matter, and we want to provide you, the viewer, with the facts and allow you to make whatever determination you feel. Well, LaPierre grew up in Virginia, the state that I currently reside in, but he didn't grow up in a house like the one I grew up in the South, growing up in Louisiana as a child, or perhaps in many of the homes that you grew up in, or the home that you're currently raising your children in. In fact, LaPierre grew up in a house that didn't have any guns. It just wasn't a part of his culture as a child. He worked for the Democratic Party straight out of college, which is why the NRA hired him. They hired him to advocate and lobby Democratic legislators in the late 1970s about firearms. And this was a very pivotal moment for the organization because at that point, the NRA was transitioning to a more aggressive 2A organization. They wanted to really advocate hard for the Second Amendment while also growing its membership. Well, it was an upward trajectory for LaPierre since, who in 1991 assumed the role of executive vice president, and he began leading the day-to-day operations at the historic organization. Well, fast forward 32 years later, and this is where we are. Wayne LaPierre, this visible yet shadowy figure, is now resigning. He recently resigned as he heads to court facing some very serious and troubling allegations about the misappropriation of funds. Yeah, your money, the money that you gave to the organization. Well, LaPierre allegedly used it on himself, his friends, and his family. Now, what's odd about this story is that as LaPierre exits the NRA, he's still taking money from the organization. Now, you're probably wondering, well, how is that possible? He's caused enough damage. Well, let me tell you how. He's set up a very, very lofty package, one that no one has ever heard of in the history of people leaving companies. And that is one that stipulates he'll receive $17 million if he ever left. Now, it doesn't just end there. One of his top lieutenants, a gentleman by the name of Andrew, who served as LaPierre's spokesperson, will assume his role on an interim basis, the NRA said. Now, I don't know Andrew. Perhaps Andrew is a good gentleman. But it does raise questions. Why would one of the top lieutenants of the guy who was accused of spending millions of dollars now leave the organization? That doesn't make a lot of sense to me, and it probably doesn't to you either. Well, as LaPierre is currently on trial in New York, where he's accused of spending lavishly, and let me remind you again, a lot of this money came from regular, everyday, hardworking people like those of you who are watching this video, people who are working 8 hours a day, 40, 50, 60, maybe even 80 hours a week if you're working overtime. Those are your hard-earned dollars that LaPierre spent. Well, the lawsuit alleges that LaPierre's actions and those close to him, which is why I questioned the appointment of Andrew to lead the organization, including the NRA as a whole. So the lawsuit is alleging the NRA didn't do anything to stop LaPierre. People close to LaPierre did nothing to stop LaPierre. Why? Well, because they were all benefiting, and that's obvious. These actions contributed to a net loss of more than $64 million in 3 years because of the lifestyle of the rich and famous that LaPierre was living. Now, in one example, the lawsuit alleges that LaPierre is accused of spending $500,000 of the NRA's assets to fly himself and his family members to the Bahamas. Now, I love the Bahamas. It's a beautiful place, sandy beaches, warm weather, great food, good people. But I go on my own dime, and I'm sure you do as well. An audit of the NRA's budget shows LaPierre spent millions of dollars on a whole bunch of crazy things. I mean, you guys can't imagine this. This is like a story from a fiction novel. He spent money on private jets, expensive meals, travel consultants, assuming they were booking these trips, his own private security. I mean, LaPierre had his own private security as if he's the president of the United States. And he spent money on trips around the world for his family, and for his friends. And another example of LaPierre's lavish spending in this story here I thought was just insane when I was doing my research. On a private jet from Washington, D.C. to Dallas, Texas, with a stop in Nebraska, LaPierre picked up his niece at the cost of $59,000. Now, my family lives in Texas. I go to Texas often. It may cost me $400 to get a round trip ticket. LaPierre didn't do that. He decided to take a private jet. Not on official NRA business. Not because he was zigzagging across the country to advocate for gun rights, to protect the Second Amendment, to grow the community. No. This was to fly his niece to Dallas. Now, the NRA has suffered greatly as a result of LaPierre's behavior. Its membership fell to 4.2 million from nearly 6 million 5 years ago. Membership dues dropped to $14 million, according to an audit of the NRA's budget. It's very obvious that the NRA was Wayne LaPierre's personal piggy bank. It's very obvious that people at the NRA allowed this to occur because they were obviously getting some type of kickbacks, which is again why I raised the question, why would you appoint one of his top lieutenants, who also happened to be his personal spokesperson, to now run the organization? And this is nothing against Andrew. He's perhaps a good man. But ethically, it raises some very serious questions. Will the organization finally move in the right direction? Now, the NRA released a statement, according to one of its attorneys, that, quote, the NRA is not that man being Wayne LaPierre. The NRA is clearly trying to separate itself. It's trying to divorce itself from the man who led the company for 32 years. I certainly understand that. This is a little PR, a little public relations cleanup here. But does that mean the organization is going to change? Well, if it were going to change, wouldn't they look to appoint someone else? Maybe they should hold elections to allow the donors, those of you who are watching this video, to have a voice, have a say in who the new leader and leadership should be as the NRA attempts to move forward. Anything less than that, in my personal opinion, isn't good enough. When hardworking people invest their money, $5, $10, whatever they have, to a cause that they firmly believe in, that organization has a moral and an ethical responsibility to do right by those funds. There are people who work hard for years, older people that I've met across this country, who would give anything they have to protect the Second Amendment. And then when you look at people like Wayne LaPierre, who doesn't care about the old guy who lives in Texas, or the father, a family of 4 in Florida, who just wants to keep his family safe and believes the NRA is the best group to advocate for his right to do so. So he's given a little bit that he can, despite not having a lot. LaPierre and those around him obviously don't care about those individuals, because if they did, they wouldn't have spent millions of dollars all over the globe living like multi-millionaires on your dime. So I have a question for you. Is this enough? Is appointing the top lieutenant, who was LaPierre's spokesperson on an interim basis, I should say, appointing him to run the organization, does that give you a good inclination that the organization is truly not that man, as their attorney said in the statement? Or perhaps the NRA is that man? Well, I guess only time will tell, but I'm curious to know what you think in the comments below. So let us know what you think. What would it take for the NRA to regain your trust? Can they regain your trust? Or do you think it's time for the Second Amendment community to move on? Maybe Gun Owners of America is that choice. I'm sure Michael Singleton, and this is Go News. We will continue to follow this story and give you updates as they come. Thanks for watching.